I decided to record this step-by-step tutorial because in class we were a little rushed and I think it was a little bit confusing. So hopefully this will be good practice for everyone and will make everything more clear about the dual direction bar chart assignment. So you'll want to start out at the spreadsheet, which is linked in the assignment description. You should make a copy to your own Google Drive and you'll see something like what's shown here. Then you want to select everything between month and percentage of articles that were positive coverage. Make a chart out of that. The bars for years are incorrect, so you remove the series for years and then you have the type of bar chart that you want. We want to make this a little bit wider and move it off to the side so that we can still see our data. Then do the same thing but include the percentage of articles that were negative coverage this time. And you want to remove year and percentage of articles that were positive from the series. Now to distinguish this from the chart we already have, we can make the color red. And then we want to move this underneath the chart that we already have. And Google Sheets will actually tell you when it's lined up by highlighting the leftmost side with a red line. Then, since we know they're lined up, we can make them the exact same width by stretching it out, and then you'll see there's a blue line that appears in between them that tells us they're the same width. You'll notice that these are actually different scales, so we need to make both of our bar charts conform to the same y-axis scale by setting the maximum value to 80 for the blue positive coverage chart. So now they both go from 0 to 80 on that y-axis, and we can be confident that they are accurate and they match. Now you want to download each of these as an SVG by clicking on the 3 dots, then download, and then SVG scalable vector graphics, and then you'll find both of these in your downloads folder after you've done that, or you should if you have a Mac that's set up the same way as mine. Next, you want to go to Illustrator. I have just a 180 by 180 square here, but we can change the size with the method that we saw in class by drawing a square of any size. I'm going to give it a color so you can see. And then using artboard fit to selected art to resize your artboard or your canvas to that particular size square. So it doesn't matter what size your project is, you can always resize it. But for now I'm going to delete this so we have a white space, and I'm going to place both of the SVG charts that we downloaded from Google Sheets into my project. It doesn't matter where, just anywhere where they don't overlap with each other. So I can see these are the right ones because of the preview in my downloads. I put both of them onto my artboard. I'm just going to move them a little bit so they're on the white space. Now we want to remove the background, so we're going to ungroup the top one, and then we can be sure that we're removing the background by giving it a color. We can see there's a square there, and then remove it by hitting the backspace. Do the same thing for the red one, give the background some kind of color, and then delete it with the delete key. Now we have an ungrouped chart, and we can tell it's ungrouped because each of the items is selectable and you can manipulate different parts of it. But when you try to click on a bar, it gives you this outline that looks like it's actually much bigger. That's because there's a mask. So you want to remove the mask, and then you can click on the bar itself. The mask object, that square in the background, is still there. So just be careful because when you try to click, it might still be there. So what I'm doing here is I'm selecting all of the bars by holding down the shift key and clicking on each of them. Then I'm going to release the mask for all of them. I know that it worked because I can see the blue outline on the individual bars. It's not around the whole space of the chart. I'm going to do the same thing for the blue bars. Again, hold down the shift key and click on each bar, then release mask. And now I can see that I can click on these individually successfully. The mask is still there, the masking object, so just be careful. That's what that square that appears on the whole thing is. So now I'm going to select each of my bars by holding down the shift key and clicking on each one of these. I'm going to select all of the blue bars first. And then I want to make these bigger. So I'm going to go to Object, Transform, then Transform Each. And in the horizontal scale option box, this would normally be 100% when you open it, but I'm going to set it to 152% and then hit OK, and that will make all of my bars a little bit thicker and bigger, like the example picture. I'm going to do the same thing for my red bars. Again, I'm holding down the Shift key and selecting each bar one by one. Then I'm going to go to Object, Transform, Transform Each. And the option is already set up for me to 152%. All I need to do is hit OK. Now, there's some spacing issues here, so I'm actually going to use the Align menu to make sure there's no space between the bars. To do that, I have to be sure that the option Align to Key Object is selected. So you'll see that in a second. I'm selecting all the blue bars now to do the same thing. When you go to the Align menu, it should say Align to Key Object. And then you hit the Distribute Space and make sure that it's set to 0 pixels to make sure that those bars are all together. I'm going to remove the months from the red chart, and then I'm going to go ahead and group the remaining parts of that chart. Next, I'm going to transform, reflect, and I want to reflect over the horizontal axis to flip this chart upside down and give us the dual direction effect that we want for this. I'm going to select all of the blue bars again, and I'm actually going to give this a yellow fill because if you look at the original picture, it's not blue on the top, it's yellow. There are lots of colors that you can pick in Adobe Illustrator. There are all these libraries of swatches. So if you're using this for your own projects and you're not sure what colors to use, you can choose any of these pre-established swatch menus and they will give you nice colors to work with. So in the original, some of the bars are actually darker. Some of them are this darker yellow and most of them are actually a light, almost transparent yellow. I'm going to go ahead and select a more light yellow to match that original. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to make just 4 of the columns darker by selecting those particular ones to match the original, and then I'm going to go ahead and give that a dark yellow, sort of a dark golden yellow. That looks about right. And you can mess with this so that it looks good to you. It doesn't have to be this exact same hex code that I have, as long as it matches the original fairly well. Then you can see the same thing is happening with the red ones. This is still grouped. I'm going to ungroup the chart, then select all of my bars again one by one while holding down the Shift key. And we're going to want to make these match the original. So we want a light red. Not quite so light, something like this. But that's only for the 4 highlighted bars. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and set this back to a dark red. And then select just the bars that need to be light so that I'm not changing the whole thing. Just those 4 bars that are directly under the dark yellow ones. Now I can set it to a light red. And that looks pretty close. Now my chart's looking a little bit wider than the original. The original is almost a square. So I'm actually going to make my bars a little bit thinner again. I'm going to select all of these once again. Both the top and the bottom. Holding down the Shift key, then I'm going to go up to Object, Transform, Transform Each. And instead of making them wider, I'm going to make this a smaller percentage, set this to 90%, and then hit OK. Next, I want to select just the bottom bars and make these all stick together so there's no white space in between, again, by using align to key object, and then distribute spaces with the 0 pixels option typed in, or 0 points. Most of your illustrators will be set to points. So align to key object and then distribute with 0 space in between. Now I'm going to add one letter for each of the months. The original does this to label the months, just the first letter for each of these. I'm using my type tool for this, and I've got 18-point font with Open Sans font. Now these are all over the place, so I'm going to select them all. I accidentally selected some of the months, so I'm going to deselect those by holding down the Shift key. Then I'm going to align them to the same baseline and distribute them across the axis so they're evenly spaced. Now I don't need these original months anymore. And I can move these over. Now it looks something like what the original does, but the original has years for some of the months. So I'm actually going to add those years in. So now it matches. And there's also text that says months where coverage was more positive. I'm going to type that out. And part of it is bold and yellow. So I'm going to highlight part of my text. I'm going to make it bold, and I'm going to give it a yellow color fill instead of black. Now I'm going to do the same thing for months where coverage was more negative than positive. I'm going to type that out again. This is bold by default because of how it was set before. I'm going to turn it back to regular, then type out months where coverage was more negative than positive. There we go. Then again, the last words should be bold and red. Let's make the fill that dark red. You can choose from the swatches or choose from the actual color picker. Either way is fine. There we go. The original has some lines that are above and below the month, so let's add that by getting the line segment tool, which is under the same menu as a rectangle, and drawing a line. To make it straight, you can hold down the Shift key while you draw your line, and that will result in a straight across line. The original looks more gray than black, so let's go ahead and pick out a gray color. I can make this 2 points instead of 1. It might be a little dark actually. Let's make that a lighter gray and just one point thick, or maybe 1.5. Make it a lighter gray. That seems okay. And we can copy that and paste it underneath the months. Okay, so now we want the years to replace some of these month letters. We don't need this first M because 2018 is going to go there. We don't need the J. The one for 2019 is the J, so the first January there. Let's see. Which one was it? Eventually we're going to want these to align with the bars themselves, so we might want to go ahead and start doing that. That way we know which month corresponds to which bar, and we're not misaligning these. Again, we don't need that J there, so I'm going to remove that. That bar is going to be 2019. I'm messing with the alignment here, but I decided to just leave it and we'll align it later. I'll show you how to make sure these line up to the bars. I'm just checking that these are in the right place. You can see that April was the smallest bar there, so that tells me I'm on the right track. And we just want to manually pull these over for now, and we're going to align them later. Alrighty, and we don't need that last January because that's where 2020 goes. Okay, then we're going to align all of these to the base so they all start on the same line. We're going to spread them out horizontally. And now we're actually going to align each letter to the bar that goes with it by selecting the letter and the bar, and then using the Align to Key Object option, then clicking on the bar to tell Illustrator that that's our key object. When you do that, you can see the bar becomes highlighted with blue. Then we center align while that is active, so that the letter is actually perfectly center aligned to the bar that it corresponds to. And this is going to take a little while because we have to do it for each bar individually, but it's going to look a lot better and more professional, and it's going to work out a lot better than the other alignment options that I was messing with before. So here I'm just going from bar to bar. I'm selecting the letter and the bar, then I'm hitting Align to Key Object, then clicking on the bar so that it's highlighted, and then using Align to Center to make sure that those line up. I'm going to go ahead and do that for all of my bars. Sometimes it takes a few tries to click on the bar and actually get it to get highlighted, but that's fine. I'm going to do this for all of my bars. And then I'm going to go back and make sure that the first one for 2018 was aligned. Align to Key Object, click on the bar, and then center align. That looks good. Great, now all of these are aligned in the right way. Now you can see here that I've went ahead and made the axis on the top. I'm going to go ahead and show you how I did that by doing the same thing for the axis on the bottom. So right now I'm just aligning a few things so that I have a good place to start with. The bars that we have here for the axis lines come from Google Sheets, and we don't want to change their position because their position shows us the accuracy of that particular bar's height. But we do want to change their width to match the original image. So I'm not moving them up and down at all. I'm only making them smaller in terms of their width and keeping them at the same alignment point vertically. I'm making each of these 40 pixels. So if any of them are above 40 pixels, I'm going to go ahead and set them to 40. And then I'm going to align all of them to the left. I'm going to do the same thing with the remaining lines here. I actually aligned these a little bit too much to the left, so I'm going to pull those over to the right, and then align again. There we go. Make this one 40 pixels as well. You can see at the top right it's 40 pixels. Then I'm going to align this to the right once again and make it 40 pixels too. Now I'm going to type out the percentages for each of these lines. Oh, it looks like this one's still 44 pixels. Let's make that 40. There we go. So I've kept my 80% here so I remember what that line represents. And I need to do the same thing as I have here on the top and create a label for each of these lines from 0 to 80. And you can see that our lines actually skip 10 each time, so these go from 0 to 20 to 40, but we need lines that are in between those. So what we actually do is copy and paste a new line. Make sure that we select all of them and keep the Align to Selection option active, and then select the line that are above and below our new line before selecting vertical distribution for a evenly distributed vertical set of lines. And this is automatically going to place our new line exactly in between the top and the bottom one, so that we know that we have an accurate axis line and that we are creating new labels that are accurate and correct. Since I already have labels on top, I'm copying and pasting the same ones to the bottom. You can also just type these in manually using your type tool. So I'm going to do that for 30. I click and I write down 30. This is still set to bold and black, so I'm going to make it gray and semi-bold, and that looks about right. That gray might be a little too dark. Let's see if regular makes it look right. No, that's too thin. Let's go ahead and leave it as semi-bold and then just make it a lighter gray. There we go. Let's make it even lighter. Okay, that looks good. So now every time that we type, our settings are going to carry over. And all of our labels will match. Or we can just copy one of the existing labels that we have and paste it as a new axis value. I'm going to go ahead and paste new values for 40, 50, 60, and 70. I'm just copying and pasting here and then moving them over with my mouse. And then we need one more for 70. And we're actually going to write 70% for this one. If you look at the original, it only goes to 70%, not to 80%, so we can actually remove that line. Now that we've used it to space out our other lines, we can remove the one for 80%. I'm going to turn off Snap to Grid here for a second to arrange the way my labels line up. Now I'm going to select all of these in just a second and make sure that they're all aligned to the left-hand side of our axis, just like the one on the top. So you can click on these individually or draw a box around all of them to select. When you click individually, remember you hold down the Shift key. Then I'm going to go to Align and align them to the left. Now they're nicely stacked on top of each other, and they follow our principle of alignment. Now, to actually make sure the space between each line and its label is the same, we want to select the line and the label at the same time, and we want to use that Align to Key Object option that we had before. So I'm going to select 70% and the line below it, then go to my Align options, Align to Key Object, and then I'm going to click on the line, set that to be the key object, before using the Distribute Vertical option with 3 points typed into the little box next to it. Once I type in 3 points one time, or 3 pixels in this case, it's going to apply that every time I have an alignment option. It's already typed in there, so all I need to do is Align to Key Object, select the little line below my number, it gets highlighted, and then distribute vertically. I'm going to do that for each one. A little bit repetitive, but it just guarantees that our spacing is correct. And it's good practice to try and select these things. Sometimes it's a little difficult to select that line because it's so small, but you know it's selected when it's highlighted in blue. Oh, this one looks like it's putting it below when we do that align. Let's try again. It's still doing it. Well, we might have to move this. We might have to move 20 up a little bit so that it detects the correct direction that we want to go. And let's try this one more time after moving 20 up above the line. Yeah, now it worked. All right, let's do it twice more for the 10% mark and the 0% mark. Okay. There we go. Now our axis looks nice and clean and well spaced and aligned. Perfect. I'm actually going to do the same thing for the top axis too. Just align and make sure there's 3 pixels between each line and the label that's above it. I don't know if I had already done this, but I'm going to go ahead and try it out just to make sure those match. Again, using the align to key object option. Okay, our axis looks good and our chart is starting to look like the original. You can see that these bars are right next to the axis, so I'm going to select all of them and actually move them over. There we go. Now they're just like the original. Do the same thing with the top. Now I'm actually going to move these lines around our months like they are in the original, but we need some space for the text that says months where coverage was more positive than negative. So we can actually bring that down to the same spot where it is in the original. And then we're going to make these lines a little bit of a lighter gray. They don't look quite light enough. And you can see actually these are starting where the text starts. They're starting where the bars start. I'm going to make this a little bit shorter to reflect that. The lines shouldn't go past the area of the actual chart. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this line instead of changing the other one. And this makes it so that I know they're the same. Now we're going to move our text a little bit down. We're going to give it some space. Bring in our other text sentence, months where coverage was more negative than positive. And then move the whole thing up a little bit. The whole bottom section up a little bit. That's looking pretty close. We might want to mess with the spacing a bit more just to make sure that it's consistent and that it has enough room for the text itself. So here I'm just using trial and error to move it around and see if it looks good. Now we need the text that's around the bars. I'm going to give myself more space on top by moving this entire thing down. I'm going to create a title with the type tool, and I'm going to type out the same title that we have in the original. It says in the 20 months since she was married, Megan received, or Megan has had much more negative press coverage. More negative starts on a new line, so I'm going to hit the enter key. Then positive. Now I'm going to make this much bigger since it's the title, and I'm going to look for a serif font that is something like the original. This one looks pretty good. I'm actually going to make this even bigger. That looks about right. I'm going to move this down. We need some space for the text. I actually want this text to be the same size as my other text, consistency. And we know that we want a yellow piece of text that says May 2018. So I'm actually going to copy the text that we already have and then just paste it as new text. so that we can have the exact same formatting and we don't have to remember our settings. And then I'm going to change it to say May 2018. That's pretty good. We need more space here. And then we need Prince Harry and Meghan something something, the text that's below that. You can go ahead and click below to start typing. This is giving us the same font settings that our title has because that's the previous settings that we had. So let's go ahead and set this back to Open Sans and 18-point size. Now we can type this out. Great. Let's move it up. We may need to align these two to each other. We need a little space above the title too, so I'm going to move this whole thing down. Move the title up. And now we have space. We want to add more text all around the chart that's just like this. I'm going to jump and show what that looks like. Okay, I've added all the text here and I've added some arrows to point to the bars. I've also resized my artboard to be more of a square with the same method that I showed before. Just draw a rectangle that's the size that you want it to be. And now I'm just selecting everything and making sure that it's spaced nicely. Then you'll want to add something like replicated by and then your name for the credit. To export, you go to export as, make sure it's set to PNG, and then you want to make sure that it's set to high resolution of at least 330 pixels per inch and give it a white background color. Then you hit OK and that saves it as a PNG to your computer. Now I realized I didn't show how to make an arrow. So you use the line segment tool to make an arrow. Then you select one of the sides and convert it to a curve. Then you go to the three dots under stroke, click on stroke and add an arrowhead to one side of the line. And that's how you create an arrow. That's it. So hopefully this helps everyone complete this assignment more successfully. And please, please, please email me if you have any questions. Send me a screenshot of what you're going through with Illustrator because Illustrator might work differently on your computer and we can troubleshoot that together. Alrighty, have a good week, everyone.